Hey everyone, apologies for not being able to make it to the hackathon workshop in person. As you can probably tell from my voice, I'm a little sick, and we're actually in the middle of a pretty huge product launch, so things have been pretty crazy for us at Shade. We just launched a product last week, and we're in the middle of a launch right now. And actually, today, when you're watching this, I will be in the middle of a launch for Shade Lend. I'll get more into that in a little bit. You'll probably get a little taste of this yourselves as we approach the submission deadline for the hackathon. But anyway, I'll get right into my talk. My name is Christian Agarian. I'm the head of engineering at Shade Protocol. And in this talk, I'm going to cover a little bit of what Shade Protocol is about and what we've been building. After that, I want to get a little bit into some power user education, particularly around how you can participate in DeFi as a developer using off-chain services rather than the traditional style of connect to a wallet and go to a front end and LP and stuff like that. So a little bit more high concept, but this is a hackathon. This is what it's about. Um, I'll be covering a little bit about arbitrage and the many forms of arbitrage that are available to you in Secret Network DeFi. And then lastly, there's a number of projects that Shade Protocol is sponsoring for this hackathon, and we're offering some extremely generous Shade rewards on top of the hackathon prize pool. So um, I want to make sure the requirements for those are clear so that you have information about where to go if you want to learn more about these projects. Most of the projects that we have sponsored are around arbitrage and off-chain services. We do have some larger projects that we are sponsoring that would result in a grant for the bulk of the shade, and those would go really beyond the scope of the hackathon. But I'll get more into that later. So first, a little bit more background about me. I've been a developer professionally for about 10 years now. I've been lead engineer at a few startups in the email security space and the clinical data analysis space. Um, but I've always had my heart in finance. To be honest, I've been an investor in traditional markets ever since I had my hands on money. In particular, I've really been interested in crypto, mostly from a technical perspective. I've been following the evolution of blockchain technology from pretty much the beginning. I finally dipped my toes into DeFi a couple of years ago with off-chain liquidation bots and arbitrage trading. I actually was doing it in the EVM world on a chain called Avalanche, but it's basically the same thing no matter where you go. It's just different SDKs, different languages. Um, I put that hat up and I joined Shade Protocol about a year and a half ago to build Shade Lend, which, like I said, I'll explain that a little bit more about that uh, in a minute. So uh, let me cover an overview of what Shade Protocol is. So we're an interconnected suite of DeFi primitives, and one of the key things about us is that we accrue value to a single token, the Shade token. And one of the problems with the previous iteration of DeFi was fractured liquidity and fractured incentives. So basically, there were a lot of different protocols building all kinds of financial products. There was a separate lending protocol, there was a separate exchange protocol, there was a separate staking derivative protocol, and so on. They each had their own token, they each had their own user experience. It created an unsustainable cycle of yield. That was the DeFi summer and the eventual bust, which we're currently living through right now, sadly. Um, and as a result of that, DeFi has pretty much been dominated by a handful of major players like Curve, Uniswap, Lido, and Aave, to name a few. Those are all Ethereum-based protocols. But there's really not many DeFi players out there. For every major one that you've heard of, there probably have been 100 people who have tried to build something similar and have failed because of this problem. Um, As Shade Protocol, we seek to resolve this by building a cohesive DeFi experience under one brand. And each of those fee streams from all of those different products go into the same DAO. So rather than trying to compete with each other, um, we're just building them all ourselves. The blueprint is out there, and we're putting it all together in a unique way. And obviously, the natural benefit of that is the unified experience for the users. In the past, you'd have to go to 3, 4, or 5 different websites to manage your money in DeFi, and it becomes extremely cumbersome, obviously. And at Shade, everything is under one roof with a familiar user experience, and that really helps to reduce the barrier of entry into DeFi. And even if you're already here, it just reduces the mental load and makes it all around a better experience. Um, and of course, the nice thing about having uh, all the contracts built by one team is that we don't really have any problems interfacing between our products, and we can integrate them better. Whereas before, if it's 4 different teams building 4 different products, you lose a lot of flexibility. They're all building it for themselves. We at Shade get to build it all together, and so we get to use the same utilities, use the same libraries, and realize a lot more efficiencies that other DeFi protocols have struggled with in the past. And so right now, we've actually got a pretty sick list of products that are live on mainnet. I'll go through each of them, and I'll specifically tie them back to the hackathon through arbitrage, when I can anyway. Not everything that we build is arbitrageable. But first, we got bonds, and what the bonds allow us to do is money in the DAO treasury or any asset in the DAO treasury can be offered as a bond, and in exchange, the protocol can specify what token they want to receive in exchange and at what rate. And so, for example, we've listed Shade bonds in the past for the Shade token in exchange for S-Secret to build up token reserves for LPing. So the DAO gave out Shade at a fixed price, and users could purchase that with S-Secret. The DAO got access to S-Secret tokens, which we could then use for providing liquidity on our DEX. And right now, we're actually offering what we call staking bonds, which allow a user to lock up Shade in exchange for more Shade in the future. This actually is kind of interesting for the developer audience, in my opinion, because it's essentially exactly like staking. We don't have traditional staking with the Shade token right now, but we realized that with the bonds product, it would pretty much be the same thing if we offered a bond for Shade in exchange for Shade. You're still depositing your Shade into a contract, you're still waiting a period of time, and you're still getting more Shade token than you had at the end of it. And it was a really clever way to use a product that's already out there to provide a user experience that we really need. Staking is pretty fundamental to DeFi, right? So the reason I say that's so interesting for a developer audience is because it shows if you're a creative thinker, you can actually get a lot of value out of your skills without doing the work. Everybody always talks about how lazy programmers are the best programmers, and I think that's actually an example of that in action. That being said, I think there is value in having a traditional staking experience. We're actually building one right now, and it'll probably be out in a couple of weeks. But while we're on the topic, if you've never done any DeFi development or any smart contract development, and you really want to dip your toes into it, and you don't know where to start, trying to build staking is actually not a bad place to start. There's a lot of resources that are publicly available, not necessarily on Secret Network, but just in the blockchain world in general. And it all translates back to, or it perfectly translates into Secret Network. You just have to write in Rust instead of Solidity and use the Secret SDK instead of a different SDK. But for all intents and purposes, the principles of how to build staking on a smart contract are the same. There's a lot of different things you have to do when you're doing smart contract development that will be foreign to you if you're not a smart contract developer because of the compute restrictions that we have in the blockchain world. The whole concept of gas is, the code that we write consumes gas. And so when you do something like loop through 1,000 users who have deposited in your contract, you're probably not even going to be able to execute that contract because it would consume so much gas. And so we have to come up with really clever ways of being efficient with our computations in order to provide the same user experience. And staking is a good first step to see if you can kind of grok the idea. And from there, the rest of smart contract development will kind of open up. So for hackathon purposes, if you're new to smart contract development, I highly suggest one of the things on your list to experiment or investigate is staking for sure. It's going to be really, really good for building up your initial momentum. And then whatever you build after that, even if it's not related, even if the staking itself is not related to your hackathon project, the experience that you get and the familiarity that you'll get with the network is going to be the primary thing of value there. I mean, deploying a contract, setting up a front end to connect with a wallet and all that stuff, you're going to have to do that anyway. It's probably best to do something simple first before you go on to something more complex. But anyway, to get back to Shade, we've also got staking derivatives. We've got the largest staking derivative for Secret right now. It's called Stake Secret, STKD-Secret. It's a bit of a mouthful. But staking derivatives are nice because essentially what they allow you to do is you earn the yield of staking the token without really locking up your money. So normally when you stake Secret in particular, you would deposit it into the staking into a delegator, or you would delegate it. Still in smart contract land right now. You would delegate the Secret to a validator of your choice, and in exchange you would get Secret emissions over time, and when you unstake, you can claim those. But the problem is you lose access to your Secret. You can't actually use it. The staking derivatives allow you to earn the same yield, and in exchange you get a token that you can then interact with smart contracts. And as I explain the next few products, you'll see exactly why this is so important and how this becomes really useful. But essentially, the way it works, there's a system in the background that distributes any Secret that you deposit into the contract to a list of top quality validators on Secret Network. And you get the Stake Secret token in exchange to your wallet. And then if you want to unstake, you can deposit the Stake Secret token into the derivative contract to trigger an unbond, and then there's a wait time between 21 and 24 days, at which point you can come back and claim your unbonded Secret, which would be your original deposit of Secret, plus any staking rewards that have accrued during that time. Now, the key thing is you have that derivative token while you are staked, and you can use that on any smart contract. So let me explain our DEX product, ShadeSwap, and I'll explain a little about how the derivatives and the DEX play together. Number one, to provide a good user experience for the users, and number two, to provide arbitrage opportunities that you can capitalize on with relatively little risk. So ShadeSwap is our DEX product. We just launched it to mainnet last week, and we've got the normal constant product pools you'd expect a DEX to have, but we also have a custom curve that we developed through our grants program that allows us to optimize the distribution of liquidity in a pool. So it's going to get a little technical, but the best way to think about an AMM, automated market maker, is essentially it's like a list of limit orders. Ideally, if you're trying to sell something, you want to concentrate your limit orders around the price you want to sell the thing for. For example, if you had one Bitcoin to sell and the price of Bitcoin was $30,000, you'd probably want to sell that Bitcoin for right around $30,000, right? The problem with a normal constant product pool is that your liquidity is distributed at every single price between 0 and infinity. So if you had that one Bitcoin and you put it into a constant product pool, you don't get to choose to sell it for 30,000. You get to choose to sell it for 30,000 and 29,999 and 29,998, and it's evenly distributed at all those prices. So that's not so great if you want to sell something for a fixed price. But the advantage of the constant product pool, which is why it is so ubiquitous, there's actually a few advantages. Basically, first, the pool never empties, so trading is always possible no matter how much liquidity the pool has. Whether it has $100 or $100 million, you'll always be able to trade as long as the size of the trade is less than or equal to the amount of liquidity in the pool. It also allows you to trade tokens that don't have an expected price. So that example I just gave where I said you wanted to sell Bitcoin for $30,000, that's the expected price of Bitcoin because that's roughly what it's trading at everywhere else. But what about when you have a token that you just launched yourself and you have no idea what price it is, right? How much is it worth? A constant product pool is very effective in answering that question because that uniform distribution of liquidity at all prices makes it very responsive to price changes. In fact, it is basically as responsive as you can possibly be to price changes without having basically a V-shaped curve that looks like that, right? Um, so if something isn't trading at what the market deems a fair price, it will quickly move to its real fair price. So price discovery is something that you see constant product pools used for. But the problem is when you're talking about tokens that do have an expected price, they kind of suck. And staking derivatives, among a few other types of tokens, do have expected prices. So right now, the exchange rate for the stake secret derivative is 1 stake secret to 1.285 secret. That is known. If you go to the derivative contract, you can turn in 1 stake secret for that much secret, and you can turn in that much secret for 1 stake secret. And that exchange rate is only going to go up over time as staking yield accrues. That's essentially how you earn the staking yield, by the exchange rate continually getting better. And so you can do this infinitely. Whether you're depositing 1 secret or whether you're depositing 100 million secret, you're going to get the same exchange rate. So you can imagine a pool on a DEX that is infinitely responsive to price is going to really suck if you're trying to trade a derivative that you know is supposed to trade at a certain price. So you don't want to have that liquidity distribution so broad, but you don't have a choice unless you come to Shadeswap, where we have our custom derivative pool. And the best way to explain this, basically concentrated liquidity already exists. Concentrated liquidity was pioneered by a DAO named Curve on Ethereum. And so when I talked about the limit orders and how it's uniformly distributed at all prices between 0 and infinity, they've developed a curve that does the same thing, that ensures prices are always, or tokens are always available to trade. But rather than it being a linear distribution, it's sort of flat like this around where the price is supposed to be. And then it kind of goes off into infinity at the extreme. So, if you're trading a stable coin, for example, USDC and USDT, you'd expect the price of USDC and USDT to trade right around $1. And so they have a curve where most of the liquidity is around $1. But for us, we're talking about staking derivatives. And what makes our curve unique is that we can actually control what direction that liquidity is distributed in. So for staking derivatives, you'd basically never, ever want to pay more than the exchange rate for a staking derivative on the market, right? If the exchange rate is 1 stake secret to 1.285 secret, why would you pay 1.3? Why would you pay 1.4? You can go get an infinite amount, as much secret as you have, at 1.285, right? With constant product pools and with the curve style concentrated liquidity pools, you can't specify a limit on that side of the pool. It has to be still equally distributed. But with us, we can say, we're not going to put any liquidity above the market price. We're going to put very, very little, because we don't expect anybody to trade at that price range. And what that does is it leaves more money in the range, the price range where you'd expect it to be. As a result, you get more capital efficiency. In fact, our curves are about 200 times as price efficient as a constant product curve, meaning you can trade 200 times as much token before the price moves. And this is the part that gets really, really interesting as an arbitrage trader. 200 times more efficient price curve means 200 times wider arbitrage opportunity, which means 200 times more arbitrage money up for grabs for a savvy developer anyway. So if Stake Secret was trading below market price, what you could do is you could buy it for the cheap price and then go to our staking contract and trigger an unbond, and then 21, 24 days later, you'll be able to collect the difference, right? If you bought it for 1.25 and the exchange rate was 1.28, then you just made 0.03 profit, 0.03 secret profit per token. And with that flatter curve, you can buy much more of that cheap derivative before the price goes back up to the exchange rate, which means more profit, right? And this is actually useful for the people who are in the pool and for the users who are trading. People want the price to be trading around the exchange rate. So by buying all that derivative, by executing the arbitrage, and by driving the price back up to where it should be, you're actually providing a public service. So it's good for everybody in that case. So to be a little bit more detailed, basically you would put some secret in a wallet for gas and also for purchasing the derivatives. You could set up an off-chain service using Secret.js or a library of your choice that allows you to operate on the Secret network chain from your code. And then you pretty much trade as a user. Monitor the exchange rate of Stake Secret, monitor the price of the derivative on the pools. When you see that the price in the pool is cheaper, go ahead and buy it. You can actually calculate, if you get a little clever, you can calculate exactly how much you should trade in a single trade to buy and then guarantee profitability. I'll talk about some techniques in a little bit to make this a little bit better, but at a high level, that's all you're doing. Buying cheap token and getting more money for it as long as you're willing to wait 21 to 24 days. So you can do the same thing with a bunch of the other pools on our DEX. We have tokens, we have pools for the Stride staking derivative tokens, Atom, Osmo, Juno, and maybe by the time you're hearing this, we'll have launched the Injective staking derivative pool as well. So these aren't secret network derivatives by Shade Protocol. These are by Stride. They're a different company. They're a different chain. And so if you wanted to capitalize on that arbitrage, it's the same process, except now you have to take the derivative token, bridge it over IBC to the Stride chain, and then you trigger the unbond there. So a little bit more work, a little bit more annoying, a little bit more barrier to entry, but if you're an enterprising individual, that means more opportunity, right? And also, it's going to help you get more intimately familiar with IBC, which is really the special sauce of Cosmos. Like, that's what makes us special. And that's going to be universally useful, not just on Secret Network, but if you plan on being in the Cosmos at all, you're going to want to understand how IBC works. And this is a fantastic and fairly low risk way to go about that. So I'll quickly touch on the rest of the Shade Protocol product suite, and then I'll go a little bit into how you might want to think about building your off-chain services. So this week, we're launching Shade Lend and Silk, which is the launch that is dragging me away from this hackathon presentation. Silk is our stablecoin. It's not pegged to the US dollar, but instead to a basket of global currencies and commodities. This makes it more inflation resistant, and it's a better token to hold if you're interested in protecting your purchasing power instead of letting it be inflated away by holding traditional fiat or fiat pegged stablecoins. Our DEX will also use the same concentrated liquidity as the derivatives for the stablecoins. So you're going to get the same capital efficiency, and that means there's also going to be lucrative arbitrage opportunities on those pools. For example, you could balance the price of Silk. If you can buy Silk for $1.01 with USDC and $1 with USDT, there's a price discrepancy there. You can buy it for cheap and sell it to the more expensive pool until the price is equalized. The difference is the money that you make. And again, because the pools are more capital efficient, you can do that more before the price goes back to normal, and you provide a service to the market and to the liquidity providers by making sure that the price of Silk and the price of everything else that Silk is trading against reflect what the market expects, right? You'd expect a dollar coin like USDC to trade at about $1. You'd expect Silk to trade at its peg, whatever that may be at the time. And the way that works, the way that happens is because of arbitrage. It's a very important service. Even if it might feel like printing money, it is actually genuinely useful. So you can actually take this a step further. rather than just executing arbitrage between the pools that are on Shadeswap, what you could do is you could take the tokens and execute arbitrage through IBC. There is risk because now you're taking much longer to actually move the money. You don't have as much guarantee about price execution. You can take this even further if you use Axelar. This is getting a little bit more complicated, but you can bridge using IBC from Secret to Axelar. And then once you're on Axelar, you can bridge from Axelar to any EVM chain that they support. And so if you wanted to capitalize on arbitrage between Shadeswap and Uniswap, you could do it. You know, if you bought USDC on our DEX for 99 cents, you could pretty confidently go ahead and bridge it over to Uniswap and sell it for $1, even after you account for the IBC wait time and the Axelar bridge time. So that's something to consider. It's a little bit more risky, but you do have those options. But really, the best thing would be to keep it simple. If you're new to this, if you're a beginner, I would keep it simple and focus on arbitrage between pools that are on the same network. It is much easier. It's much more profitable, much more low risk. So I wouldn't venture too far into the IBC and Axelar stuff until you get really more comfortable. And then lastly, we got Lend. That's how you mint Silk. So Lend allows you to deposit collateral like the staking derivatives that we've been talking about. And then you can borrow Silk using that collateral. You continue to earn the staking yield from your derivative that is deposited as collateral, and then you also get some Silk in your wallet to play with. It's a loan, you have to pay it back, and there will be interest and fees and all that, so it's not free money, not quite. But it can be useful for arbitrage because you can get some Silk in your pocket without actually paying for it and without actually giving up any of the tokens you already have. There's really hundreds of ways you could use borrowing in order to execute any kind of off-chain DeFi activity, not just arbitrage. If you're really interested in that, there's plenty of resources on the internet. It's not specific to Secret Network. So I'll leave it there for now. I think I've showed you guys enough on the protocol. So let me spend a little bit of time talking about some of the best practices to help you understand arbitrage trading. And the first thing, well, you don't necessarily need to write a contract to conduct arbitrage. You could just do it with a bot. You could do it manually. You could open up your browser and go trade on two pools. It's a lot better if you use a contract because you can imagine a scenario where you buy a token at what you think is a good price, and by the time you sell it, the sell price has changed and you've no longer made a profit. Someone else found it before you, right? You might even have lost money. If you implement arbitrage through a smart contract, one of the cool things you can do is execute the trade on the contract and then calculate what you're going to receive at the end. And if it's not profitable, you revert the transaction. So all you really lose is the gas that you used to execute the failed transaction. Then you really only need an off-chain service that can monitor the prices and then call a message on the contract that actually executes the arbitrage. You could literally just run a script on a schedule on your computer, and once you nail it down, throw it in a cloud provider, let it run overnight, and make money while you sleep. Although, one thing you got to keep in mind with arbitrage, trading actually gets really competitive, so you're going to be in a constant arms race with the other arbitrage traders trying to get the fastest execution time. So, you know, I kind of say flippantly, make money in your sleep, but really, you know, every couple of days you're going to be trying to modify stuff, and because someone has beaten you, and maybe what you were doing before hasn't quite worked. The nice thing about Secret Network is it doesn't have a very rich network of power users doing this type of off-chain arbitrage. It's still in its infancy, which means it is not as competitive. It's a good environment for you to learn. So I would highly recommend, if you're interested at all, even a little bit, to try dipping your toes into this stuff. And like I said, there are plenty of resources outside of Secret Network if you really want to get deep into it. One thing to consider is that Secret is actually a little bit unique in that a lot of the techniques that you would use to execute arbitrage is not available to you because of the privacy. It's not impossible to recognize patterns if you're astute. For example, one of the things you can do is you can't see what message somebody is executing on a contract. That information is private, but you can see how much gas they used. And if you look at a contract, you look at the history of messages that are executed and see how much gas is being used, you can kind of suss out what gas use pattern aligns with what message execution. And that can be useful because if an arbitrage opportunity stops working, you can go look at the block explorer and see, oh, there's this other person doing these transactions. It looks like they're doing the same thing that I am, and they're just faster than me. So, maybe a competitor has caught on to this, and I should do something different. I should optimize. Optimizing your bot, it gets pretty deep. And to be totally honest, I haven't actively done arbitrage trading for about a year. So like the space has almost certainly moved on beyond my expertise at this point. So I unfortunately, I can't give you any sick tricks to be super profitable. And to be honest, it wouldn't work anyway if I gave them out. Only one person could do them, and then you'd have to compete with that person. So it wouldn't even be worth it. So you're going to have to be creative on your own. But really, if you're going to be an arbitrage trader, even as a side hustle or something, be creative thinking is the most important thing. You actually don't make most of your money arbitrage trading by writing the fastest bot. It's more about finding opportunities, and it's things like finding a pool before it launches, and then being the first person to arbitrage on it as people deposit liquidity, right? That's a very high volatility period of time. There's going to be lots of arbitrage opportunities if you're in there first. Or, something like if you find a predictable trade, maybe a protocol does scheduled buybacks at a known time. That's a huge oversight on their part. Nothing stopping you from front running it. So stuff like that is something you really got to consider. It's more about the creative opportunity finding rather than writing the bot. But writing the bot is still important because other people are going to find your opportunities too, and it gives you a better chance of actually capturing them if you have the best service. The last thing you might want to investigate if you're interested in off-chain services is liquidations. Borrowing through smart contracts is very common in DeFi, not just here. And the way these systems are secured is by communities of liquidators who are incentivized to run the liquidation infrastructure that ensures that the collateral that backs these loans is sold to cover debt in the case that a user is not repaying their debt. This is basically how you can't run away with free money after it gets minted, because if you do that, you're going to lose much more value in the form of the collateral that you deposited because someone's going to liquidate it. So at Shade Protocol, we have a stability pool. This allows anyone to deposit their silk, and the silk in that pool is what is used for liquidations. So if someone has some debt, silk is taken out of that pool, the silk is burned out of supply, and the depositors get the collateral, a portion of it, and they get it at a discount, and that discount is called the liquidation fee, and that represents the profit. So if there's a 10% liquidation fee, that means liquidating earns you 10% profit of the value of that debt. The way that liquidation ultimately happens is with an off-chain service. There's a public function on the Vault contract. Anyone can write a service that calls this function, and anyone can run a service that queries the Vault to see the list of positions that are eligible for liquidation. And so the way this would work, you would write a service that queries the contract, gets the list of risky positions. When it finds one, it calls the liquidate function. That will take silk out of the stability pool. You don't need any silk yourself. All you have to do is pay the gas for the liquidate message. The silk gets pulled out of the stability pool, liquidates the position. Then profit gets distributed. 10% of the profit left over after we've covered the principal amount of silk that's been removed from the pool, that 10% of that profit amount goes to you as the caller of the function. That's your reward for running this service. It's very low risk. It's a bit like a lottery. That's kind of how I think about it in my head. It's not really, but in terms of the profit margin, like if you get a $1 million liquidation, and that, let's say that liquidation had a 10% fee, you as the caller would make $10,000 as your reward. And all you had to do was pay the gas to call that function. So very, very easy service to write. Very, very low risk if you really want to get into it. I highly recommend it, even if you're a pro, just because there's no reason not to. And you can earn a significant sum of money if you get lucky. And the liquidation interface is going to be available in our GitHub once Lend is out. It's obviously not out right now. It'll be out by the time you're watching this. It'll be out later in the afternoon, US time. And at that time, I'll update the docs in GitHub with the message interfaces and provide some information about how you could execute liquidations. So be on the lookout for that. The last thing I want to touch on, because I think I'm running out of time, is the major sponsored projects. If you look at the hackathon repo that we have in the Secure Secrets repo, or in the Secure Secrets organization on GitHub, you'll see that we're offering some very significant shade rewards, up to 20,000 shade for a fully fledged product. To be totally clear, these would be like literal, fully built, professional quality products. They're going to be fully tested and audited and everything. This would be follow-on work. Your award would essentially be a grant to take what you built at the hackathon and flesh it out into a product under the Shade Protocol umbrella. They're not going to make good projects if you're a beginner, or even if you're intermediate or experienced. It's really something you'd want to develop with a team. I highly recommend you try it if you're ambitious. The worst case scenario, even if you build something and we don't accept it, you could build your own protocol with it. There are still milestones, so even if you don't want to take on the goal of building a fully fledged product, you can still dip your feet into it and kind of dip your toes into it and get a feel for what it's like to do actual factual DeFi development and see if it's for you. These projects are a bigger deal. There's more information about them in the repo, and if you have questions about them, feel free to message me. The best way to reach me is going to be on Discord, in the Shade Protocol Discord. I think my name is just Christian A in Discord, so you can just @ me in one of the chats, probably the dev channel, and I'll do my best to answer questions. If I get bombarded, no guarantee, but like I said, I'll do my best. It is launch week. So that's it for me. I hope you guys found this talk useful. Again, I apologize for not being able to be present for the workshop. I was really looking forward to working with you guys, answering any questions, but I do look forward to seeing what you guys build and judging the projects. I hope you enjoy your time developing on Secret Network. And again, let me know if I can be helpful. Find me in the Discord. Good luck.